of Fools. Pretty bleak title. It was the best-selling novel that year. It's set on a ship making a 30-day voyage from Mexico to Germany in 1931. So it's on the verge of becoming Nazi Germany as we know it. It was inspired by a trip that she took herself from Mexico to Germany 2 years before when she set the story. As the title suggests, it's a book without heroes. It's a ship of fools. In the novel version, there's 600 men, far above capacity, crammed into storage down beneath. They're just cargo, essentially. They're Spanish workers. The Cuban sugar industry doesn't need them anymore. They're just crammed like so many boxes of stuff, and they're being shipped back to Mexico. Most of the action happens on the first-class deck. The wealthy pass their days in this parade of vanity and prejudice, venality, hypocrisy. At the end, they all get off. Nobody's changed. It was just 30 wasted days of many wasted lives. But 3 years later, in 1965, a man named Stanley Kramer, a well-known producer, turned this book into a highly acclaimed movie. It was nominated for 8 Academy Awards. It won 4. And it gives a very stark, unflattering picture of the people on board this ship of fools. And that was the name of the movie as well as the book. There was a drug-addicted countess and a married doctor who falls in love with her, and the captain of the ship thinks she's interested in the doctor because he can provide the drugs that she wants. There's a loudmouth Nazi sympathizer talking about German superiority. There's a Jewish man who just feels sure that the Nazis really aren't that bad, as he would find out later. There's a brooding artist. He's sure he's a genius, but he doesn't understand why his paintings won't sell. He's in this tumultuous relationship with his wife. There's a bunch of flamenco dancers to entertain the crew, but their manager traffics them out at night. There's an aging beauty, divorced, who thinks she's just too good for any man would pay attention to her. Constant frustration there. There's an American baseball player who never made it big. There's a man who's married to a Jewish wife, planning to dump her so he can get ahead in Germany. A sad, sad picture. Ignorance, prejudice, naivete, stunning self-centeredness, and just lack of self-awareness. Delusions of grandeur, bad choices, betrayals. We get the point. That's just a picture of a society headed to destruction. Ship of fools. Well, Porter and Kramer borrowed that idea from a book from 1494 it was a long poem entitled Ship of Fools. And it talks about Germany at that time. It's full of criminals and crooked lawyers and hypocritical churchmen and just all the evils of society. But the first ship of fools set sail in Plato's Republic. And in Plato's Republic, he imagines a ship that sets sail. The captain is captain only because he's a little bit taller and bigger and stronger than the other crew members. He doesn't know much about navigation. His crew doesn't know much about navigation either. But they all want to be in control of the boat. So they're all trying to bribe the captain or beg the captain, or one time they drug the captain and get control of the ship. But if anybody else gets the rudder, then they turn on that guy and kill him and throw him overboard. They raid the stores, and they're all eating up all the food. Nobody knows where they're going or how to get there, but they all want to be in control. It's a ship of fools, and that's a terrible thought. People look around over and over again, ever since Plato's day to our own. What's wrong with this world? How did it get to be this way? Well, the Apostle Paul asked that same question in his letter to the Romans. Paul was a cosmopolitan man. He grew up in Tarsus. He was well off. He was a Roman citizen. He knew the Greek world. He knew the Greek culture. We know that because in his address on Mars Hill, he quoted Greek poet and a Greek philosopher. So he knew the Greek world. He knew the Jewish world. He was educated at the feet of Gamaliel, he says, which was like being a graduate of Harvard Law School. That was about as high as you could go with your training, and that's where he was trained. He was associated with the Sanhedrin. We know that from the stoning of Stephen. He was probably something like a law clerk in today's Supreme Court. So he knew the Jewish world, he knew the Greek world. And here's what he wrote to the Christians in Rome. He wrote, "What then? Are we any better off than the pagan world? Certainly not. For we have already charged that Jews and Greeks alike are all under sin. Just as it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God." He's quoting there from Psalms 14, by the way. All have turned away. Together they have become worthless. There is no one who shows kindness, not even one. Their throats are open graves. They deceive with their tongues. The poison of asps is under their lips. His whole world is a ship of fools. And the foolishness that he's talking about is not silliness, it's not triviality, it is sin. Because sin is the ultimate foolishness. And as we will see and talk about more later, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So foolishness is the real problem. It's dangerous sin, and it grows from a very foolish thought. You know, wisdom gets in step with God. Wise people get in step with God. Fools think they're smart. They feel sure they know how to get what they want. They're going to go about getting it. They're free, but they end up free falling, and that's where they are. We look around, this kind of folly is in our world. We see it everywhere. Educated people can be biblical fools. Sophisticated people, gifted people can be and are fools in God's sight. Clever people, ordinary people, young people, old people. This is a world infected with foolishness. And here's the bottom line. Every one of us, at some point in our lives, hopefully not now, we have bought a ticket on the ship of fools, and we've gone up the gangplank and we've stepped on board. We've done foolish things and maybe had to pay a price for that. But let's look at the first three verses of Psalm 14 before we get any further. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Actually, literally, the Hebrew says, the fool says in his heart, no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. This is sort of an important psalm because it appears twice. It's the only psalm to appear twice in its entirety. The book of Psalms, our book of Psalms, is divided into 5 parts, 5 sections, sometimes called 5 books, although we don't call them books. But Psalm 14, which appears in the first section of the Psalms, is also Psalm 53 that appears in the second section of Psalms. So it's repeated in its entirety. It's a Psalm of David. It's important. So we need to spend some time trying to understand what it's about. David just laments the state of this world. And look what he says. There is none who does good in the third line. Repeats that in the next to the last line. There is none who does good. Not even one. Look at the second line. They are corrupt. Look at the third line from the bottom. Together they have become corrupt. What he sees when he looks around is corruption and not a single good person. Now, scholars debate this. Is he referring to the whole world? There's no one good in the world, period, or there's no good fool, and fools predominate? I tend to think he's not talking about there's no good person at all. But most of the world, speaking in generality, behaves foolishly. Most of the world doesn't believe there's a God or acts as if there's not a God and finds themselves in a terrible situation. But I would say this. No one instinctively, no one naturally does good all the time. So we're all subject to that. We need to be aware of that. And we need to be aware that we're not talking about other people. We're talking about ourselves. We need to be looking in the mirror when we talk about fools. I hope we've all escaped folly and foolishness, the wisdom that comes from Scripture. I think about that well-known hymn. I didn't realize it was really anonymous, although it's attributed to James Duffel and William Featherston. Duffel was only 16, newly converted when he wrote this, according to accounts, but no actual proof. You know the song, "My Jesus, I love thee, I know thou art mine. For thee all the follies of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, my Savior art thou. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now." Hope we can all say that. The follies of sin I have resigned, but they can creep back in. We need to be aware and be on the lookout so we don't have that happening. Proverbs 26:11 says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly." You can escape it, and folly can come back in. So today is about recognizing the habits of fools, the traits of fools, to see when we find ourselves starting to get in step with a world of foolishness and not the wisdom that comes from God. 3 different Hebrew words, by the way, translated as fool and foolish and folly. One is nabal. If you remember the account of David and Abigail, Abigail was originally married to a guy named Nabal, who was really a fool. He's arrogant and insulting. David takes care of his sheep gratis. His soldiers protect the herd. Nobody can steal them. And then he goes to Nabal and says, "We've been taking care of your sheep all season. Make sure nobody hurt them. We'd like a little food to help support us." And he says, "Who are you? Go ahead and leave." Absolute arrogant fool. Well, he dies of a stroke or heart attack. It's not clear. He just sort of drops dead that evening. His wife then marries David, who takes care of her. But Nabal, fool, and his name was just Fool. I guess that was a nickname, probably. Another Hebrew word, kosil, that's also fool or foolish. Evalith, all these words translated. They all mean basically the same thing. This is a quotation from lexicons. Spiritually insensible, morally insensible, ethically degenerate. It's really not talking about your thought capacity. It's talking about, can you see spiritual truth? Can you see moral standards or not? And that's where the essence of foolishness is. So how do you recognize a fool? How do I see when I'm headed down a path of foolishness? When I look in the mirror, do I see little traits of foolishness? Do I see a little three-belled hat on my head, that I need to get rid of, becoming foolish? Proverbs gives a lot of pictures of foolish behavior, so that's something good for us to look at. But before we do that, we need to remember what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5. He said, "Don't call another man fool." If you do, you put yourself in danger of hellfire. So when you use the word fool, we're not to sit here and pass judgment on others. You're a fool, he's a fool, as if I'm not. We need to attach that word to ourselves, to scrutinize ourselves with that. Looking at others and calling them fool while you're putting yourselves on a pedestal, that's absolute sin. Puts us in danger of hellfire, Jesus says. But it is a biblical word, so we need to recognize what it is. It warns us against it. Let's look at some things that characterize folly, foolish behavior. I'm going backwards. Proverbs 1:7. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. You can't tell me anything. I know it all. I don't need anything else. Fools, in this biblical sense, please with yourself. I'm sure I've got it all figured out. I see no room for improvement. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And the moment you can't tell me anything, we're in the place of a fool. Great danger. I know everything. You can't tell me anything. I'm doing great. Man, we've got one foot on that gangway up to the ship of fools. Proverbs 1:32 repeats that thought. The complacency of fools destroys them. If you're complacent, that means you're self-satisfied. I have reached the pinnacle, the epitome. I'm good. Whoa, that's the greatest danger, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know God, then you don't know God. And you feel like you're doing great, and you may be in a terrible place, spiritually or otherwise. Another sign to look out for. Whoever winks the eye causes trouble, and a babbling fool will come to ruin. If you think you're the center of the world, you got nothing to learn, nobody can tell you anything, what happens? Babbling. You just say. Some translations put chattering fool. It means you just say whatever comes to mind. You think your thoughts are of monumental importance to the world. And just whatever comes to mind, you just blurt it out. You just say it. My opinion, my thought, my prejudice, my suspicion, just chattering, just blurting out dangerous, unhelpful things, babbling. It could just be repeating cliches and memes, things you've heard. Babbling, chattering. Proverbs 10:18. Whoever utters slander is a fool. Guess what I heard? Particularly in a negative sense. Gossip, evil reports, treating other people's lives as if it's entertainment. Stories to tell, slander. Or maybe you want to damage someone else, so you spread stories. That's the action of a fool. They think there's no standard greater than themselves, and they can shape reality, tell stories, and do all of these things and get what they want. Proverbs 10:23, doing wrong is like a joke to a fool. For those of us who've raised children, you know what it's like when baby knows they're not supposed to do something, child knows they shouldn't do something, and they'll do it anyway just to test. You know, don't you go in the kitchen, so they'll go there and put their foot in just to see, you know, whatever it is, test. And then they'll smile and laugh like it's a joke. I can laugh it off, and no, that's not how this thing works. Trying to get away with something. Transgression is a joke. But grown-ups play that same game. Popular entertainment. Let's find the next line we can cross and transgress. It's joke. It's funny. A few more Proverbs and we'll move on. Proverbs 12:16, the vexation of a fool is known at once. Fools have no filter. because there's nothing bigger than themselves. There's no governor. They just fly off the handle. The Bible says, be angry and sin not. You're angry. You can't help being angry sometimes. But they just fly off the handle. The vexation of a fool is known at once. A fool may think every personal provocation is of serious matter. It justifies extreme reactions, all that stuff. Well, look it up more. Proverbs 14:9, fools make fun of guilt, but the godly acknowledge it and seek reconciliation. Some say fools make fun of sacrifice, thinking here of a guilt sacrifice. No, fools say, I don't need to apologize. I don't need to do anything about that. Deal with it. I did what I did. That's foolish behavior. Proverbs 15:14, the mouths of fools feed on folly, just nourish themselves on foolish narratives in the world out there, foolish statements that other people say. So do we feed on God's word? Do we find nourishment? Do we feed on folly? One of the first proverbs I remember memorizing. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Some people just can't wait to tell you what they think. Don't tell me facts. Don't do anything. I just want to tell you what I think, you know. And my only pleasure is just telling everybody what I think. Okay, that's foolish behavior. That's the heart of the problem. When you don't hear God, there's nobody else to listen to. So you just talk. Well, we fall in love with our own words. Words from the mouth of the wise are gracious, but fools are consumed by their own lips. Fools talk, and their words come back to haunt them. At the beginning, their words are folly. At the end, they are wicked madness. And fools multiply words. Look at 13. At the beginning, their words, that includes our thoughts, are folly, just foolishness. At the end, they are wicked madness. Keep chattering, just keep talking your opinions, just doing all these foolish things we just looked at. You will end up in a state of wicked madness. So we don't get down that path. That's where we go. That's a dark assessment of human nature. There's no one is righteous. No, not one. Is that true? Well, the fact is we live in a post-romantic, sentimental world, and sentimental romanticists believe that goodness and sweetness and light is the nature of human beings, that we're just naturally good, angelic beings. So if anybody's not virtuous, it must be somebody else's fault. Conditions of society, of family, whatever it might be. So where does the problem lie? Why are people fools? Is it poverty? Social and cultural inequities? Not enough freedom growing up? Maybe excessive freedom growing up? Bad education? Too much education? Coddling by parents, helicopter parents, that kind of thing? Or is it bullying by others? Broken families? Too much praise growing up? Not enough praise growing up? Not enough healthy food? Not enough exposure to the arts and history? You know, why do some people behave foolishly? We know the answer, don't we? The answer to all of those is yes, they all contribute. If you're on a ship of fools, then fools are around you and they treat you in a certain way. And I'm talking about the biblical fool, wicked people who have turned their backs to God. And you suffer. People suffer for that. Bad experiences can complicate a life and put you behind the 8 ball forever. And God understands every situation, every bad experience, every whatever that's happened that may damage a person's psyche and soul and character. He knows that. God will judge fairly. But we work so hard to overcome that damage. Free breakfast and lunch at school, afternoon snacks, tutoring, study time at school, scholarships, free phones, free internet, tax-free days at the beginning of school, preschool, summer programs. Does this kind of remediation work? Well, a little bit in some cases. But think about this. Can you think of anybody who had those kind of hurdles in their life but took a better path? Can you think of anyone who didn't have any of those hurdles in their life but they made bad choices? Well, where you start in life makes a big difference. Training matters immensely. Opportunities matter. Your experiences growing up, trauma that can happen. School bullying has led to so many of these school shooting incidents, ruined the shooter's life, ruined the life of those children, in many cases just from bullying. So yes, your circumstances can have a terrible effect, but we can manage to be fools even without those things happening to us. The problem is not just environmental. Proverbs 22:15 says, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him." Problem in the heart. There's something down in there, and we'll never understand it all. There was a big thing in the 18th century. Some, quote, scientists thought we need to discover what the original language is. What was the language of Adam? And they thought if we just take some children and we never speak to them, we raise them in total silence, no one ever says a word to them, then they will begin to speak the language of Adam. What a boneheaded idea. Guess how those kids turned out. Talk about your environmental influence. Nobody ever talked to them. And they thought they would just sort of start speaking the language of Adam. Damage them terribly. We can do the same thing morally. If we just don't put any boundaries, we just let children do what they want to, they're just naturally good and they'll just do good things. So as long as we don't impair their lives, give them absolute freedom, they'll just be good. Well, we know that's about as insane as trying to get kids to speak the language of Adam. The rod of discipline drives it far from him. This is not about child discipline, and the idea is not child abuse, of course. If you want my 2 cents worth in 15 seconds or less, corporal punishment works best when it works before they're really very verbal. And just a little pop on the leg a few times saying, nope, don't do that. When I say something, I mean it, and they're testing that boundary. Establish that, and you don't have to do a whole bunch of spanking later, but everybody's different, every family's different. But the point here about the rod of discipline is a clear, firm direction. That's what children need. And David's point is children do foolish things because they're children, because folly is bound up in them and need to be trained. But what's the biggest, most serious problem with foolishness? It's found in verse 1. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Literally, the fool says in his heart, no God. What comes out of your heart is what matters. And your heart refers to your way of thinking. It refers to your values. It refers to the things that you remember. It refers to your priorities. And those things are shaped by our environment. But every person's heart is his own, no matter what the environment is. Jesus in Matthew 15:19 said, out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. There's one evil thought that really fuels all of those. And what is that evil thought? There is no God. That's the ultimate folly. And what does that mean when it says there is no God? It can mean intellectual denial of the existence of God, theoretical atheism, there is no God. I can't believe a God created all of this, but I can believe it all created itself, that position. But it also involves the agnostic who says, I'm not sure if there's a God or not, but, I can live any way I want to. It's God's job to prove to me that he's there, and if he didn't give me a proof, then I'm off the hook, and I didn't deny that he existed. And so that's a practical kind of denial of God, saying there's no God that really affects my life. If there is a God, he's just out there somewhere. Could be a belief that God is not really relevant, makes no claims on me. There is no God. That is, there may be a God out there, but there's no God in my life, no God in my world. I want nothing to do with, and I don't need to have anything to do with God. If God will stay over there and take care of God things, I can handle my life just fine. Well, that's saying there is no God. There's no God for me, no God in my life. I'm not talking about just any God, of course, talking about Jehovah God to say all of that. Hebrews 11:6 says, whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Got to believe that. Our time is getting a little bit short here. Let me jump ahead just a little bit. Proverbs 14:12, there's a way that seems right to man, but the end thereof is the way to death. So how do we resolve all of this folly? How did we respond to living on a ship of fools and finding ourselves tempted to behave foolishly in the biblical sense? Let's go to verses 4, 5, and 6. Have they no knowledge, all the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord? And here we see the particular kind of foolishness he's talking about. These people who denied God and said, I'm captain of my world. I can take advantage of all of these poor people, fleece them as my sheep, and there's no God to call me to account. Have they no knowledge, these evildoers? They don't call upon the Lord. They may intellectually say, yeah, maybe there's a God, but they don't call upon the Lord. So for them, there is no God. Look at verse 5. There they are in great terror, for God is with the generations of the righteous. That word terror, I'm not sure it's the emotion they're feeling as much as they're in great danger, they're in great jeopardy, they're in great danger. For God is with the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. People who think they know it all forget one thing. God sees all, God knows all, and the Lord will take care of his own in his time, in his way. So many of David's Psalms so far that we've seen basically deal with some problem, and they have the same resolution. God knows what's going on, and God will eventually make it right. And that's what he's saying here. The bell just rang, so let's look at the last slide very quickly, finish the psalm. He ends up by saying, oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice, let Israel be glad. That's a prayer we should all make. God, fix this ship of fools. Help us to gain wisdom and not be led astray by our own wickedness of heart, by this wicked world around us. One day the Lord will restore the fortunes of his people. we can all rejoice. We look forward to that in hope. We'll stop with that, and we'll pick up with the next psalm, probably Psalm 16, I think, next week.